Hi, this is Bob from Hobby Concepts, and today I'm going to show you how to make a day cab, which is removing the sleeper on a king hauler style body. This is one here that's finished. I'll show you some tips and tricks for doing that. I know I talked about it in my dump truck video, but I wanted to make a standalone video on the day cab, plus I've got some new tips. Everybody, I really appreciate all the great comments I've been getting on my videos. And my new website, Hobbyconcepts.net, has been really good. So I appreciate it. Love doing this. Thanks for watching. Let's get started. So as I get started modifying this body into a day cab, I need the base plate, the back plate, the mounts for the base plate, and this is one of the rear bumper covers. There's a lot of extra ones of these usually laying around in a grand hauler. You don't use them. They come in the kit and they come in the MFC unit. So, but you need a 90-degree piece of plastic. So to start with, good old-fashioned X-Acto razor saw, and I just cut literally cut the sleeper saw off with a saw, and it's not more complicated than that. So I'm going to cut this off and then I'll come back. Now you can see that leaves a rough edge, which I will just kind of trim off some of that saw residue with my knife, so I can see what I'm looking at. Now, there's a lip left from the cut, and what I need to do is cut that down so it's smooth. Now, everybody probably has their own favorite way of doing that. The way I generally do it is just use an X-Acto knife. You could sand it. The problem I found sanding is that it gets these edges here. So I'm going to just take my X-Acto knife, and it takes about 10-15 minutes, and I'm just going to cut this down until it's flush. So I will do that, and then I'll be back. I took my knife and cleaned up this edge. I haven't done anything else except an X-Acto knife, so I smoothed it off. I did not change the opening at all. One other thing is I'm going to save this because later I'm going to make a double sleeper truck, and I'll use this piece, and I'll probably do a video on that. So now what I'm going to do is cut down this bulkhead so it fits in this new smaller opening. In order to cut this down, I found that if I cut just outside this hole and just outside this hole, it's going to give me the right size of bulkhead. So I'm going to take my square right here. I'm going to score a line, and then I'll snap it. Now that I snap that piece, I will actually take my X-Acto knife and cut these ridges off the back side, including this ridge around the bolt hole. Basically, again, using my X-Acto knife just like I did on the body, and I'll get completely rid of these bumps. Now on this side, I'm going to measure 1 15/16. And that is right here. Make a mark, and then I'll use my same 90-degree square. I'll do it on this side. Get my little mark, and do the same thing. Score it, and then I'll snap it. Now you can see that I pulled the area out right between those. So when I put this back together, my seam will be in the center, which is where I want it. You can also see that I've got a little bit of trimming to do just to get these to sit flat together. And then those should just fit right in here once I get those trimmed and glued together. So I'm going to hit these with my disc sander real quick. I could clean them up with a knife. I'm going to pull the pieces off the back side here, and then I'll be back. So I've trimmed these edges, and they fit together pretty good. They don't have to fit perfectly. I've checked to make sure that they fit the opening in the body, and they fit just fine. So now I'm going to glue them together. The way I do that is I take this leftover piece and I'll cut a 1/2 inch strip of it. Exactly the same way as the other pieces. I'll just score it a couple times. And it's a pretty thick piece of plastic, so I have to grab it with a pair of pliers to do it. But it will break along the split line. There we go. Okay, so there's a 1/2 inch piece of plastic. Now, I don't need it to go all the way to the bottom. As a matter of fact, I don't want it to go all the way to the bottom. The bottom comes out somewhere around where these bolt holes are. So I will make it just a little bit shorter than that. And I'll do the same thing. I'll just score it here and break it. So I've got my pieces. I cut my strip here, and I'm going to glue it on. Now, I always use Tamiya extra thin cement. The stuff is fantastic. I don't use anything else to glue styrene. I'm going to put a 1/4 inch mark here, just so I can use it to align this halfway. And I'll just spread a little cement on here. Lay my piece on, and notice I've got it up at the top here, and it doesn't go all the way to the bottom. We've got a gap down there. We'll just put some cement in here. And same thing on this side. Put cement in there. And it's real thin, so it wicks right into the gap. And the way this cement works is it basically melts the plastic, so it melts the plastic together. Now I want to lay that one on, so we'll lay a little cement on here. Line up this edge and do the same thing. Wick a little cement in. And we'll do a little bit in this gap here. Okay, so I'm going to let this dry about 5 minutes. And then we'll come back and do the next part. In order to cut the height of this properly, I'm going to need to mount the floor. So I'm going to go ahead and mount these rails per the instructions. And then I'm going to mount the body to the floor per the instructions. I mounted the floor plate in here, And the reason for that is I now have to cut this body down, or this back plate down. It's too long for the way I intend to mount it. So what I'm going to do is make a mark where the bottom of the floor plate is on each side. And I'll lay my piece in here and mark it on each side. And that's where I'm going to want to cut it. So I will do the same as I've done before with just some minor changes. That's where I want to cut it. But it's hard to score it and snap it when you've got this piece here. So I'm going to do a little extra work to get through these first. And then I'll draw my line, and then I'll score this and snap it and sand the bottom edge. You can see that these holes are still showing, and you can fill those, and I'll show you how to do that too. I snap those off, and now I can put this piece in here. And I'm pretty well flush with the bottom, maybe just a hair up, but I can sand that later when I do the final fitting. So now what I'm going to do is make an L bracket that bolts to the bottom of this. So I'm going to cut this edge off here and cut this, and that'll give me a nice little plastic L. So I'm going to go to my bandsaw and do that. I'll be right back. So there's my little L bracket made out of a piece of that plastic. And it's going to go right here. I'm going to drill some holes through the bottom and bolt this on. Now I've made this out of aluminum, I've made it out of plastic. I've finally settled on these little plastic pieces that come in for the rear bumper. I'll have to probably trim this just a little bit. And what I want is a nice slot in here so this panel will drop into the slot. And then the standard brackets, or the standard latches, will fit in here and latch it to be able to open it up and get access to the inside. So I'm going to remove the floor and we'll bolt this on. Well, there's my little plastic L bracket. And I'm going to bolt it right to the bottom here. You can see I trimmed it off. So I left a slot here, which is big enough to grab the door. Now I'm just going to drill a couple of little holes. I'm going to use some of these smaller size Tamiya screws. And so we'll just put one right here. Not rocket science where they go, that's for sure. Well, that made a mark. That's all I need. So I'll bolt this side on, and once that's bolted solid, I'll drill the other side and bolt it. You can see I've got my L bracket mounted. It's nice and solid. So I'm going to go ahead and remount this to the body, and that way I can get my back panel all trimmed up to the right height. Floor's mounted in there and my little bracket's on. So now this is going to fit like that, and it just doesn't quite drop in. Just a little too tall down here on the bottom, especially on this side. So I'll use my permagrit sander here. Do a little bit of work on this. Just a little bit more until we get that to drop in. There we go. Now I'm going to just fill those 2 holes. Might do just a tiny bit more trimming. And we'll be ready. I took a thin piece of plastic card, cut a strip off of it, and glued a couple of small patches on the back side of this to cover these holes. And then I will use perfect plastic putty to fill these holes. Before I do that, there's a strip of rivets left across the bottom, and I will use my knife and just cut those off. And I'll sand that a little bit too. Makes it a lot easier to do the cleanup on this. And then the final thing I'm going to do is for the seam, I'm going to cut a piece of thin plastic and glue it on here to cover the seam and give the back bulkhead some interest. So I'll go ahead and cut that, glue it on, putty those in. My putty has dried, so now that it's dry, I'm just going to cut these plastic tabs off the back that I installed. That way, when I slide this in, the tabs won't be holding out on the bottom, and my bulkhead still fits. So the next step is to wet sand this back edge and wet sand this, and sand these down and wet sand those to kind of clean them up. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. So for wet sanding, I just use a good old laundry sink. I've got a block with some wet or dry sandpaper on it, and I just like doing a lot of water. We'll just clean up this edge. So I'm going to go ahead and sand this all down. Once I get done with this, is I think 220, then I'll do some 400 and then some 600, and that should smooth it out just how I want. And the same thing with the bulkhead. I'll sand down my putty, sand the bottom, make sure everything comes out nice and smooth, and even the back side, so that it fits in that slot good. So I'm going to go ahead and finish this up, and then we'll go back and I'll show you one other trick. I got that all wet sanded. It turned out nice. It feels smooth. This piece fits in there great. So I'll install the latches just like the Tamiya instructions show. Put this one on here. And those will latch, hold that on, and that pretty much completes it. I'm going to show you one other trick though. I'm going to remove it off of this bottom. The last little thing I like to do on these day cabs, there's no place to hide the wiring from the upper lights. It just doesn't work good. So I cut a little piece of plastic. This is 7/8 by 1.5, and I'll glue it in this corner down here. Like that. And I know it's hard to see. I'm going to glue it in with some Tamiya extra thin, but then I can run my wires down here and drop them down through that, and it hides all the wiring. So I'm going to glue that in. You can see the, well, I hope you can see it, the piece in here. And the reason I don't go all the way down is I need to be able to get the nut on the back side of the exhaust. So now I can drop my wiring through here and it'll come down nicely in the corner. So we'll put the base plate back on and put everything together. Here's my finished day cab. They look great, short like that. The latches pop and it opens up just like a standard king hauler, so you can get in there for electronics or batteries or whatever. And here's a finished one that I've painted, so you can see what they look like. This is on a king hauler frame. You can see the back end there. Makes a nice looking truck. I think I'll probably, this truck, I've got it for sale on hobbyconcepts.net right now, but I also might convert it to a flatbed stake truck, is what I'm thinking about. But if I do, I will do a video on that. So there's the finished day cabs, painted, unpainted, just finished. I really appreciate you guys watching. I love it if you subscribe to my videos, and don't forget to check out my website, hobbyconcepts.net. Thanks.